The hum of the ship's engines was both a lullaby and a torture. Hours had stretched into days, or maybe it was weeks' time felt warped within the suffocating confines of slip space. The journey was disorienting, a bizarre distortion of reality that never failed to leave a bitter taste at the back of one's throat. Staring too long into the slipstream through the viewing screens was not just a bad idea, it was an invitation to madness. Those who dared to gaze into that shifting, liquid void often found themselves haunted by nonsensical visions and whispers that seemed to crawl into their skulls. No wonder the crew had taken to covering every viewport with thick shutters, creating a bubble of enforced normality within the ship. But the lack of natural light only made the atmosphere feel more claustrophobic, as if the walls were slowly closing in, squeezing the life out of anyone brave or foolish enough to step aboard. The protagonist, slouched in a corner of the dimly lit common area, sighed for what felt like the 100th time that hour. Boredom was a beast that gnawed relentlessly, each repetition of that hum grating on their nerves. The air carried the scent of recycled oxygen and stale sweat, a mix that clung to their senses. They absent-mindedly twirled a loose thread on their uniform sleeve, their mind drifting in circles. Who knew interstellar research missions could be so glamorous? They thought dryly, rolling their eyes. Just me and my cozy spot in this tin can, surrounded by the stench of anticipation and existential dread. With nothing to break the monotony, they had resorted to sarcasm as a defense mechanism. After all, sarcasm had a way of keeping the edges sharp, especially when everything else felt so dreadfully dull. A low, monotonous chime interrupted their musings, signaling an incoming announcement. The automated voice crackled over the intercom, slightly distorted, as if the system itself had grown weary of the journey. Attention, arrival imminent. Please prepare for disembarkation. The words were a welcome relief, albeit laced with the same robotic indifference that defined every corner of government-run expeditions. The protagonists dragged themselves off the bench, stretching muscles that had stiffened from hours of inertia. Finally, they muttered, rubbing at their tired eyes, "I was beginning to think slip space had eaten us whole." The ship shuddered slightly, a gentle tremor that signaled their transition back into normal space. The pressure in the room shifted, a silent reminder of the forces at play. With a few deep breaths, they steadied themselves, the anticipation creeping in to replace the boredom. Even the most seasoned travelers couldn't quite shake off the anxiety that came with the end of a slip space journey. As they moved through the narrow corridors, the protagonist caught glimpses of fellow passengers, all scientists, researchers, and a handful of military personnel. Their faces reflected a spectrum of emotions, from excitement to exhaustion. The ship's lighting, an unflattering shade of artificial white, cast harsh shadows that made everyone appear more ghostly. It was fitting, perhaps, given their destination, a remote and secretive research facility buried deep in a system most people had never even heard of. A place shrouded in secrecy and the kind of eerie, whispered legends that only fueled the imagination. The docking bay doors hissed open, releasing a gust of air that carried an unexpected chill. The facility loomed ahead, a series of stark, angular structures that seemed to claw at the sky. Harsh floodlights bathed the area in an unforgiving glow, casting long, skeletal shadows over the rocky ground. The protagonists stepped off the ship, their boots crunching against the coarse, dusty soil. A shiver ran down their spine, though whether it was from the cold or the atmosphere, they couldn't say. "Welcome to the middle of nowhere," they whispered to themselves, their voice barely more than a breath. Population us, and a whole lot of unanswered questions. A uniformed officer directed them toward a series of corridors, the walls lined with metal panels that seemed to soak up sound, making every step feel muted and heavy. Eventually, they reached the briefing room, a sterile space with rows of chairs and a large projection screen that dominated one wall. Government officials, clad in sharp suits, were scattered throughout the room, their expressions unreadable. The air buzzed with a tension that felt almost electric, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The protagonist found a seat near the back, grateful for the relative anonymity it provided. The room gradually filled, the quiet hum of conversation a stark contrast to the oppressive silence that had permeated the ship. Scientists whispered theories and speculations, while military personnel exchanged grim nods. The sense of anticipation was palpable, each person keenly aware that they were on the verge of something monumental. A man in a crisp, dark suit finally stepped forward, clearing his throat. His presence commanded attention, and the room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady and authoritative. "What you are about to hear is classified beyond the highest levels of government secrecy." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "We are here because of a discovery that could change everything we know about the galaxy," he continued, his eyes scanning the room. "An ancient civilization, referred to in our most classified records as the primordial predecessors, has left ruins on this very planet. Ruins that are, quite frankly, unlike anything we have ever encountered. They are more than just remnants, they are mysteries wrapped in secrets. And their potential significance cannot be overstated." The projection screen flickered to life, displaying images of colossal alien structures, symbols etched into stone with a language so complex it defied full comprehension. The protagonist leaned forward, a mixture of awe and apprehension twisting in their gut. The images felt almost otherworldly, evoking a sense of both wonder and dread. "Our goal," the official continued, "is to unlock these secrets, to understand who the primordial predecessors were, what they left behind, and why. But be warned, the ruins are peculiar. They do not obey our understanding of technology or time. Proceed with caution, for curiosity may come at a cost." The room was left in stunned silence. The protagonist felt a chill creep up their spine, the words resonating in a way that made their pulse quicken. This was no ordinary mission. They had stepped into the heart of a mystery that promised both discovery and danger, and there was no telling what awaited them in the depths of those ancient ruins. The briefing dissolved into a buzz of murmured conversations, but the protagonist barely registered any of it. Their thoughts were already miles away, buried deep in the ruins that had now captured everyone's attention. They shuffled out of the room with the rest of the group, the weight of the mission pressing down on their shoulders. It wasn't long before they found themselves standing at the mouth of a vast, shadowy entrance carved into the side of a jagged cliff. The air felt colder here, tinged with a metallic scent that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. Despite the daylight filtering in from above, the cavernous space ahead swallowed up the light as though eager to guard its secrets. The team stepped into the darkness, their footsteps echoing ominously. The walls were lined with alien technology, structures that seemed both impossibly old and disturbingly alive. Every surface pulsed with a faint, otherworldly glow, casting deep shadows that danced with every movement. The protagonist couldn't help but feel a deep sense of awe, though it was mingled with a fear that clung to them like a second skin. "This place feels like it's waiting for something," they whispered, half to themselves, their voice swallowed by the vast emptiness. As they ventured further, the ruins grew even more haunting. Massive corridors stretched out in every direction, adorned with intricate carvings that twisted and spiraled in ways that defied human understanding. Symbols and texts lined the walls, the language a chaotic blend of shapes and lines that made the mind reel. Only a handful of scholars had ever attempted to decipher it, and even then, their translations were little more than guesses. The protagonist ran their fingers over one such inscription, the grooves worn smooth by time. "What are you trying to tell us?" they murmured, but the stone offered no answers. They turned a corner and stumbled into what must have once been a grand hall. Towering pillars supported a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness, and the floor was littered with strange artifacts, obelisks, fractured statues, and crystalline constructs that shimmered with an internal light. The team spread out, each member gravitating toward different pieces of alien relics. One scientist carefully examined a series of engraved discs, while another marveled at a floating sphere that emitted a low, humming sound. "Over here," called a voice, drawing everyone's attention. The protagonist made their way to the source, where one of the engineers was crouched over a console embedded in the wall. It was still active, flickering with symbols that twisted and changed faster than they could be read. "Whatever powers this place is still running," the engineer said, their voice tinged with disbelief. "And it's adapting. I swear these symbols are shifting in response to our presence." The tension in the room thickened. The idea that the ruins were still active, still observing them, sent a shiver through the group. The protagonist felt their pulse quicken. It was as if the entire facility was a slumbering beast, rousing from a deep sleep, its eyes beginning to open. They pressed onward, deeper into the labyrinthine corridors, their steps growing more cautious. Eventually, they found themselves standing before a massive door. It was carved from an unearthly metal that shimmered and shifted, as if made from liquid stone. Ancient runes covered its surface, each one emanating a soft, ghostly light. The door had no visible handle or keypad, only a smooth indentation where a face might rest. "Looks like a voice-activated lock," one of the linguists murmured, their brow furrowed. They turned to the protagonist, whose limited but functional understanding of the alien language had earned them this responsibility. The protagonist's mouth went dry. They stepped forward, the weight of expectation pressing down on them. Drawing in a shaky breath, they closed their eyes, trying to recall the sounds and inflections they had studied. The language was more music than speech, each syllable resonating with a strange, melodic rhythm. With as much confidence as they could muster, they spoke the command, their voice echoing through the chamber. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a deep, resonant groan, the door shuddered. The runes pulsed brighter, and the metal surface began to split down the center, peeling open like the petals of some alien flower. The air was sucked into the chamber beyond, a gust that carried with it the scent of age and something faintly electric. The facility around them seemed to shiver awake, lights flickering to life, machinery humming to a rhythm long forgotten. A low vibration coursed through the floor, growing stronger with each passing moment. "What did you do?" someone whispered, but the protagonist had no answer. The massive door had revealed a cavernous room filled with towering constructs, cryogenic pods or something eerily similar, arranged in perfect rows. Inside each pod lay the still form of an alien being, their features twisted and otherworldly, but unmistakably humanoid. The facility was alive now, the pulse of energy coursing through every wall, every object. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed throughout the chamber, speaking in the ancient tongue. The protagonist felt a chill, the words reverberating in their bones. The voice seemed to seep into their mind, ancient and commanding, carrying the weight of millennia. Then, from the shadows, shapes began to materialize. Soldiers formed from hard light and armor that shimmered with the same alien energy as the ruins, emerged in perfect formation. They moved with a precision that left no room for doubt. These were warriors of the primordial predecessors, guardians who had waited eons to defend their domain. Panic flared in the team. Weapons were drawn, though the sense of their own helplessness was evident on every face. The protagonist's heart raced as the soldiers closed in, their unreadable visors reflecting the chaos of the moment. No one dared to make a move, the room caught in a breathless standoff. Whatever force they had awakened had been waiting a long time, and it was not inclined to show mercy. The room was vast, stretching so far into the shadows that the end was swallowed in darkness. The light from their equipment cast long, wavering beams across rows of towering structures. As the team cautiously stepped forward, their breaths caught in their throats. These were not ordinary constructs. Cryogenic pods or perhaps coffins stood in orderly ranks, each one housing a still, alien form. The bodies were humanoid, but the resemblance stopped there. Pale, almost translucent skin clung to elongated limbs, and their faces were narrow, with eyes closed in what seemed to be an eternal sleep. Strange symbols, etched deep into the walls and floor, pulsed with a steady, rhythmic light, as if the entire room were breathing in unison with the beings it housed. The protagonist moved slowly, their boots whispering against the smooth, metallic floor. They couldn't shake the feeling that they had intruded on something sacred, a tomb preserved for eons and now disturbed. Goosebumps rose on their skin as their gaze traveled over the pods, each alien figure encased in technology so advanced it looked almost like magic. The sense of awe was overwhelming, but so was the fear. The weight of what they had awakened pressed down on their chest, making it difficult to breathe. A sound like rolling thunder reverberated through the chamber, and they stumbled back, the air suddenly thick with tension. The disembodied voice that followed was immense, shaking the very foundations of the ruins. It spoke in the ancient tongue, the words deep and echoing, each syllable carrying an authority that demanded obedience. The protagonist's mind raced, but something clicked into place. The language was no longer a jumble of incomprehensible sounds. They understood it. The realization hit them hard. The facility, whatever consciousness it held, had scanned them, learning from their memories and adapting. It was aware of them, and it knew their language. The voice continued, its tone shifting from command to something almost curious. The walls vibrated as if the entire complex was alive, pulsing with the voice's power. The protagonist could feel the words inside their head, a mixture of awe and terror churning in their gut. "It's communicating with us," one of the linguists whispered, their face pale with disbelief. But there was no time to ponder the implications. The facility was waking up in earnest now, and whatever force lay dormant for millennia was no longer content to slumber. From the shadows, the first of the soldiers emerged. Their forms were constructed from hard light, shimmering and shifting as they solidified into something tangible. They resembled the beings in the cryogenic pods, but wore armor that gleamed with a liquid-like sheen, plates etched with the same symbols that covered the walls. Each soldier carried a weapon made from the same hard light, an extension of their own intimidating presence. They moved with a coordinated precision, their footsteps a synchronized drumbeat echoing through the chamber. The protagonist's heart raced, their body frozen with fear. These soldiers were not relics of the past. They were protectors, guardians resurrected from the ashes of a forgotten empire. The air grew electric with the rising tension, and the team instinctively backed away. One of the researchers stumbled, a sharp gasp escaping them, and the sound drew the attention of the hard light constructs. Without hesitation, the soldiers raised their weapons, their visors glowing with a cold, blue light. "Hold your fire," the team's security officer yelled, but the command sounded small, laughable in the presence of these ancient beings. The protagonist's hands trembled, and they knew instinctively that any act of defiance would end in catastrophe. Slowly, almost painfully, they raised their hands in surrender. The rest of the team followed suit, their movements jerky with fear. The soldiers advanced, closing in with an efficiency that left no room for hope. The protagonist's throat tightened as one of the constructs stepped forward, a warrior clad in glistening light armor that hummed with energy. The alien soldiers showed no emotion, no hesitation. Their visors remained fixed on the humans, but there was no way to see into the cold, unyielding blue that obscured their faces. The protagonist could feel the tension in the air, a thread stretched so thin it was about to snap. The enormity of what they had done crashed over them like a wave. This force, ancient and unknowable, was beyond their understanding. They had unleashed it, and now they were at its mercy. One of the soldiers reached for them, its touch unexpectedly warm despite its hard light composition. It seized the protagonist's arm with a grip that left no room for resistance, leading them forward. The rest of the team was similarly subdued, each member captured and herded like prey before a predator. Dread pooled in the protagonist's stomach, and a sense of deep, inescapable doom settled over them. The voice of the facility had spoken, and its guardians had risen. The ruins were no longer dormant. They were alive, and the consequences of disturbing them were only just beginning. The grip of the hard light soldiers remained unyielding, each step echoing ominously as the protagonist was led deeper into the heart of the ruins. The rest of the team followed in tense silence, their faces pale and eyes wide with fear. The ruins seemed to pulse around them, an alien heartbeat that was growing stronger, more vibrant with each moment. The journey ended in a vast chamber that dwarfed everything the protagonist had seen so far. It was bathed in a spectral light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, and at the center stood a throne made of swirling, shifting energy. Sitting on that throne was a figure, and it was unlike anything the protagonist had ever imagined. It was humanoid, but its features were sharp and refined, a strange elegance that defied description. Its eyes glowed with an ethereal blue light, and a thin, flowing garment made of energy draped over its body. The being tilted its head slightly, as if considering them. The soldiers released their grip, and the protagonist stumbled forward, knees weak. "Step forward," the being commanded, its voice resonating with an unnatural echo. It spoke their language perfectly, but the words were heavy, almost as if the being were testing them, feeling their weight on its tongue. The protagonist swallowed hard, stepping closer. They could feel the ancient eyes on them, the scrutiny of something far older and far more powerful than any human could comprehend. "You who have disturbed our slumber," the being began, leaning forward. "Do you understand what you have done?" The question was rhetorical, but the silence that followed was suffocating. The being's gaze was piercing, as if it could see right through to the protagonist's soul. "I am called human," it declared, the name falling from its lips like a relic from a forgotten past. "We once ruled the galaxy, long before your species took its first stumbling steps into the stars." The protagonist could barely breathe. The weight of that revelation was staggering. "Human," they repeated, disbelief threading through their voice. It seemed impossible, a cruel twist of irony. The being's mouth curved slightly in what might have been a smile or a grimace. "Yes, human," it confirmed. "Our civilization flourished, a golden age of power and knowledge. But even we were not immune to the endless cycle of destruction. A cosmic war swept across the stars, a force so devastating that it left us with one final choice: to sleep, to wait, and to hope that the galaxy might one day be safe for our return." Its voice softened, almost wistful, but there was no warmth there, only the echo of ancient regrets. The chamber seemed to vibrate with the gravity of the past. The protagonist's mind raced, trying to piece together what this revelation meant. "And now," they asked, their voice cracking, "why wake up now?" The being's eyes darkened, the glow shifting to a deeper, more somber hue. "We did not expect to wake at all," human admitted. "We prepared for this slumber to last an eternity if needed. But here you are, small and curious, your species exploring ruins you do not understand." It leaned back, fingers drumming thoughtfully on the arm of the energy throne. "The galaxy you inhabit is a shadow of what it once was, a fragile tapestry held together by ambition and fear. We cannot say whether our return will bring salvation or ruin." A cold dread settled over the protagonist. The idea that this ancient civilization could bring either hope or devastation was a burden that was almost too much to bear. The implications of their actions, of disturbing this slumbering empire, were horrifying. "So what happens now?" they asked, hating how small and powerless their voice sounded. Human's expression remained unreadable. "You will leave," it said simply. "You and your people will not interfere with our revival. We will rise on our own terms, as we once did. Whether we bring harmony or destruction depends not only on us but also on how your galaxy chooses to greet us." The warning was clear, a blade hidden within layers of elegant speech. The protagonist nodded slowly, a sense of helplessness washing over them. The soldiers stepped forward once more, but this time their touch was less forceful, guiding rather than dragging. The protagonist and their fellow researchers were led out of the chamber, back through the labyrinth of corridors. The facility's lights pulsed brighter now, the ruins no longer dead and dormant but alive and waking. As they emerged back into the harsh light of the surface, the air felt different, heavier, filled with the weight of everything that had just transpired. The protagonist looked up at the sky, a sky that suddenly felt far too close, the stars more foreboding than ever before. They had come here seeking knowledge, but what they had found was something far more dangerous. The future of the galaxy had shifted in that moment, tilted on an axis they could barely comprehend. "What have we done?" someone whispered, echoing the question that rang in the protagonist's mind. There was no answer, only the distant hum of the ruins behind them. The ancient beings would rise, and whether their return would bring an era of enlightenment or a new age of conflict remained to be seen. The protagonist's thoughts swirled, caught between hope and fear, the uncertainty of the future stretching before them like an endless void. They had awakened something that should have remained asleep, and now the consequences would ripple across the stars. With every step away from the ruins, they felt the weight of that choice pressing down harder. The galaxy would never be the same again, and as they boarded their ship, one thought loomed above all others: they had played a part in setting something unstoppable in motion. Whether it would lead to triumph or tragedy was a question that no one, not even the ancient beings, could yet answer. The unknown awaited them, vast and unyielding, and the only certainty was that they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed.